Disk space.
I was just waiting for someone to hear. Hello, everyone.
All right. Hey, everybody. We're Disk Space. God, I'm losing my mind. All right, I'm Guy. You might know me from the one sleep paralysis demon that sits on your bed and eats Chex Mix. Joining me today, we have Kai from Chain of Being. I'm just gonna go clockwise. Greg as the conductor from Ghosts on a Train. A very special guest in Mr. Jonathan Sims from the Magnus Archives, as well as game design. Bunch of other really cool projects. And last but certainly not least, we have Bryan, the Dungeon Daddy from East Coast Adventures. So yeah.
Johnny's here, like, not sure whether he should have talked about the hat yet. But
didn't want to mention it.
I mean, obviously, like, I assumed that... I mean, you told me that his name was not Daddy, so I wasn't going to be,
Only a few people call me that, but yes.
And it's one of us here today, but we're not going to tell you who.
It could be any one of us. All right, we're just going to jump right into this. So this was kind of a weird episode because, Bryan, this was your initial pick, which got changed over from, I believe, Tales of Symphonia.
Correct.
And normally what I like to do for guests, although it didn't happen this time, usually I like to have the guest pick the game, but for this one, Johnny, you jumped right in. So let's start off with, let's start with Bryan. And why Resident Evil 4?
Why indeed? So like you said, I originally had Tales of Symphonia because that's a great game that I grew up with. However, Resident Evil 4 was a game that made me fall in love with the series. It was actually the first Resident Evil game that I've played. And it's a game that I constantly love going back into and experiencing the funky aiming system that stresses me the fuck out, and just love going through and like trying different weapon builds and loadouts. And I figured it was a good, fun, horror-esque game that we could enjoy playing through, even for, I don't know, I think everyone in our group has played it before.
Nope.
Oh, nice.
This is my first time going through it.
Good. I am intrigued to hear your thoughts about it, because I remember the first time I played through this game, it was one of those games where I had to play late at night because my dad would like walk in and be like,
boy.
"Oh, no, you can't. Why are you playing this game?" But yeah, great game. So I figured everyone would enjoy it.
Yeah. And so, Johnny, you actually came in saying that you are kind of a Resident Evil.
So yeah, it's really weird that you brought up like dads in association with Resident Evil. So like I Resident Evil is one of these series that's like kind of been tied to my soul in a weird way. Like, that's not to say that I think it's good or that I even always like it. But so when I was like 8 or 9 or something like that, Resident Evil 2 was about to come out, the original, and I remember I bought this magazine, this like PlayStation magazine at the corner shop, and it had a feature on it, and like it had all the blood stains and all the like horror accoutrements in the graphic designs, and as a kid I was like, oh, this article about an upcoming horror game is the scariest thing I've ever read. Because the only other horror I had read at that point was the Martin Adams novel Sonic the Hedgehog in Castle Robotnik. But
scary for other reasons.
I mean, that book has a surprising number of references to the movie Hellraiser. But but anyway,
interesting.
And then like a year or two later, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis came out, and my dad bought it, and I sort of grew with my dad, and it was just this really nice sort of bonding experience. It was one of the first like horror games I'd ever like experienced at all. And after that, I played through it myself, and then I went and played like Resident Evil 2 and the first Resident Evil. And when the GameCube came out, like that was the first console I had that was like my console. Like it was in my room. It wasn't like a family console. That was mine. And so when the Resident Evil remake came out, when like Resident Evil 0 came out, and ultimately when Resident Evil 4 came out, I absolutely dived in and just devoured them. Though Resident Evil 4, weirdly for me, was actually like the last Resident Evil that I was invested in or played for like many years, until I picked up Resident Evil 7 like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is quite good. And for some reason, it unlocked something in me. I was like, oh, I need to consume all the Resident Evil media.
Oh wait, all the media? Not just the games, all the media?
Well, I mean, I haven't. I've got a recording of the Japanese Resident Evil musical, but I haven't actually watched it yet. And to be fair, when I say all the media, there's like 28 different continuities. So like, not all the media, but a lot of it. So it's weird. It's just one of those series that is weirdly, inside me. And I'm like, I guess I'm just gonna know too much about Resident Evil forever.
Sorry.
Beautiful.
So sorry.
No worries. It's not a live stream if there's not a little bit of scuff, right?
But household, you know how it is. Cool. Apologies.
Yeah, like Resident Evil definitely seems like one of those franchises where you can really dive in deep and just like, I'm going to hyperfixate on this for a while and just like consume all of this. For me, that was Gundam, so that also explains, the depression, but hey.
What have you got me into? I bought one because of you.
You asked it. Neither here nor there. All right, we're just gonna go like keep on rolling like right in. But thank you both for sharing. That's fantastic. So I'm actually going to jump around because I have a very appropriate question for this as kind of a follow-up. So Resident Evil is kind of odd as a franchise because it's got very like distinct kind of like play styles and sort of like theming around the game. I would say like 1 through 3 are all like very kind of linked. 4, 5, and 6 are also like very linked, and then 7 and 8 are also very linked. So, are there any other Resident Evils that you would sort of like be interested in trying or like going back to and experiencing after Resident Evil 4 and playing through it for this show? And let's start with Greg, because we haven't heard from you yet.
Sure. Well, I know better than to try 5 or 6. But RE4 was my first Resident Evil that I ever played back in high school. So coming back to this was nice. But I recently watched a series of a trilogy of videos by a YouTuber, Sophie from Mars, that went over like all of Resident Evil, and I do kind of want to go back and give the first few a fair shake, because I've started Resident Evil 1, not the remake or the 0 or anything like that, just the first one on the PlayStation a while ago.
Ooh,
and I couldn't quite get into it because it was
I mean, I would probably say that at this point, that like there is a lot of games from that era are very much like, if you didn't play it at the time, they are almost unplayable to just like to go back and try, just because they rely on so much other, like what the other video games at the time were doing and the assumptions you're coming in, and also they expect you to have sat down and read a rule book, like a little manual, like the number of things where you're like, I don't understand, and you're like, oh no, that's because it's expecting you to have like read through 8 pages of how this works.
And as people on the previous episode of Disc Space will remember from me and Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy IX opened up that whole big Moogle with rules, and I said nope, and I was all the more fool for it later.
So it goes. Actually, Jonny, let's go with you. If you are going to go to another Resident Evil sort of after this and just sort of like take it in, where do you think you're going to go next?
I don't know. Like, I mean, it's been a while since I've played any old ones, but also like I don't feel like they have like the remakes, I think, capture a lot of what is great about the old games while like making them actually fun to play these days.
Yes, RE2 remake. That looks good.
I was a bit disappointed by the Resident Evil 3 remake. I thought they captured some of it, but there's just a lot of good stuff in the original one, and like it was very much the first game where like you're actually being chased by a monster. Like the old Resident Evil games had this system where like to go between screens, because they were all pre-rendered areas, there was like a little doorway animation. And in all the early Resident Evils, like if you got to a door, if you saw that doorway animation, you were safe. Everything behind the door stays behind the door. You're in a new area. And in Resident Evil 3, the original, the first time, you like hear the like Nemesis coming for you, and you're like, okay, turn around, go through the door, and you're like, okay, I've gone through a door, I'm safe. And he just drops from the sky, and he's like, oh, I'm actually being chased. Absolutely terrifying. I haven't played it for so long though. I don't know if it's held up. But no, I did recently do a playthrough of a lot of the older ones. So I did for my Sims play through Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6. I actually have a secret. Like I kind of, when Resident Evil stuff goes into the really bullshit lore. So I have a soft spot for Resident Evil 6, and it goes really hard. Like the opening cutscene of like the Leon storyline in Resident Evil 6 is Leon shooting the zombie president of the United States in the head. You know, which is like that's a lot. That's a strong opening.
That is a strong foot to put forward.
Leon as a character is so exciting. I think I would follow like Leon's adventures exclusively.
Yeah.
And they're not compelling as like a compelling character, but more just like he gets to do the coolest shit from what I've seen.
Sorry.
No, go on.
He does, but he's kind of a herb. He's a bit of a chump. Like,
yeah, he's a dork.
He's the fresh-faced cop who, like, I'm gonna do some good. Oh no, zombies! And then they escape, and then the government's like, hey, do you want to be our? And he's like, yeah. And then he goes on a bunch of missions, and like, he's always like, let's do the right thing. And he's working with this is quite complicated and maybe a bit morally grey. And he's like, no, I think I'm just going to shoot the monsters. And continues all the way through.
On the subject of him being a chump, I need to get this off my chest. Whoever did the writing for all the little like codec calls, like especially between like him and Sadler and him and Salazar, of just like every single one of them was just like, haha. It feels like they're trying to be just like, we're having a witty dialogue, some repartee, and it just like, both of you are stupid. You are both idiots, and you're both like thinking you're way smarter than the other one, but you're both stupid. It was incredible.
All right, trying to end the conversation.
Even the ones between him and I don't know the character name, but like the woman who's like
Hunnigan.
Yeah,
Hunnigan was okay.
Like, he's just like, I've just been like stabbed 7 times. I'll be fine. And it's like he just completely brushes off everything. He's like, I don't know. Yeah, he does nothing. Nothing seems to hit him. Nothing. I mean, yeah. You were talking about how like insane the character. The way he kicks things is my favorite thing in this entire game. That kept me going past all my issues with it. It's just when there's this old man like doubled over, he just runs up and does a fucking spin kick into the ground.
Oh,
it just got me
so much.
That was the thing that kept me going.
Bryan, are there any other REs that you would like to explore? Either sort of like in the more action side, more kind of a classic survival, or the more modern ones, or the movies even. Who cares?
Oh, the movies.
Throw those in there.
So I've played through the, I guess, main 8 already, with the remakes included. But one that I've always wanted to dive into, but I've been kind of afraid to, just mainly because of how old it is now, and I know how frustrating the controls will be, is Code Veronica X. And it's one of those RE games that I've been waiting for a remake announcement for, and I'm just like, come on, please. Like, I just want to experience it. Like, give me more Wesker. And so that is one that I want to jump into next, because I haven't played it. So that is my easy answer for that.
All right. Kai, I have a feeling I know how you're going to answer based on your experience with this one, but are there any other Resident Evils that you think you might explore?
Well, if it's going to be anything, it's going to be 7 and 8. I mean, it might be more relevant to talk about it later, but I as playing this game, I realized that I think maybe my sort of young brain has been ruined by the kind of fast-paced games. I play like Doom and Halo and kind of Titanfall 2 and these kind of things where it's very, very quick. And so this game was excruciating for me because I can't walk and stab someone at the same time. Whereas playing literally any other game I play, that is part of the entire experience. So I think if it was going to be anything, just because of familiarity, it'd probably be 7 and 8. Probably 8 for obvious reasons. And so I think, yeah, that would be like, you know, just, I don't know. I'm also very vain when it comes to graphics and stuff. I do sound like such a horrible bastard when I talk about like these older games, but like I like it to look good and I like to be able to move without
What
like,
version did you play? Like, there's a million versions of Resident Evil 4. What did you play?
Like VR? Like...
Yeah. Like, I played
this one where you're like...
This one, yeah.
Oh, the Wii?
Yeah.
I'm on PC, but like it did, like, yeah, it didn't look, I mean, it looked old. Sorry. It didn't say like remaster or remake under the title. It just said RE4. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think like Resident Evil 4 definitely suffers. It suffers from being revolutionary. in the sense that like,
Yes.
it was the first game that like really nailed this particular sort of like over-the-shoulder third-person sort of thing.
Absolutely.
And which means that we've now had like almost 20 years of games iterating on it, doing it better, so that like it's like whenever you read something that's like, oh yeah, this created a whole new subgenre, you're like, really? Because it's not very good. Like, nothing else had done it before.
You get it with old films as well, like Citizen Kane. It's like, yeah, but think of the context. It's like, yeah.
Okay, thank you, context. But yeah, RE4 is a very interesting kind of case study in that, because you can definitely like see the iterations, because it came out like a lot of the iterations sort of like came out relatively quick afterwards, like Gears of War, Mass Effect, like all these sort of like over-the-shoulder camera games. I can't remember any others, my brain is escaping me, but just you can see sort of like how it gets like iterated and improved upon. But like here, like it works, but also I think I spent more time fighting the camera than I did the zombies.
My God, yeah. I want to look in the direction I'm looking in instead of the one that my body is facing. Please, for the love of Christ.
It definitely feels like it, like one part of it went off and became your classic cover shooter, like your Gears of War, your Uncharted's, that sort of thing. And the other way went much more towards like your third-person character action stuff. So like your kind of God of War, or like even some of the FromSoft stuff.
Absolutely.
And like I think both of them, like both of those subgenres, have like an element of like Resident Evil 4's legacy. But yeah, it's rough.
The minecart sequence.
Oh.
Try aiming while on a minecart. No, you cannot. Not allowed.
I failed that big fish moment as well, like 4 times, but I think.
Oh
just
no!
Oh.
I'm
Del
not
Lago
very good.
got you.
I didn't realize you could move the boat as well. I just had to hit the fish. I didn't realize there was more to do.
I think maybe the thing to do is to start right from like Resident Evil 1 PS version and just hate it.
And then by the time you make it to 4, yes, you're onto something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
After like the month you spent beating your head against ridiculous tank controls and having like 6 pockets, you like finally get onto like Resident Evil 2 and you're like, oh, this is actually a bit better. And then finally you're at Resident Evil 4 and you're like, yes, modern game design.
Yeah.
This is a modern military shooter. All right. Let's just keep rolling right along. Quick time events. Speaking of Resident Evil 4's legacy, I think this is, if not the one that really like started it, definitely popularized it. So how do we feel about them? Because speaking personally, I think they work well in Resident Evil 4 because they really do like ramp up the tension. It means like even in the cutscenes, you cannot set your controller down. You have to be like paying attention. Like you don't have really like a moment, and it's just sort of that creeping dread in the back of your skull the entire time of just like what's going to happen. So I think it worked here. I think David Cage can eat my entire ass. Fuck that.
No.
I didn't get up to him this time around, so I don't know if I would hate it more. But those of you who I only got to like chapter 4, like 4-1, most of the way through 4-1 this time around. But I remember the Krauser fight.
Krauser knife fight,
yeah, it's a boss fight that's there is one boss fight that is basically entirely QTEs while Leon and this other guy are having a conversation about what the fuck's happening. So you kind of have to like pay attention to what's happening and also do the QTE.
Yeah,
Sorry,
like, it's not the Krauser boss fight, which does happen later.
Oh,
yeah.
But it is like a 5-minute cutscene.
Okay, yes,
with
yes.
like 12 QuickTime events of this like knife fight, like exposition knife fight, and if you fuck up one of them, you're going back to the beginning because you just died.
Oh
and
god!
I think I've got some time for quick time events. Yeah, like in certain contexts, it does sort of keep your focus on and this sort of thing. But like it's the binary sort of, if you fuck up a quick time. Sorry, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Fuck yeah.
Right. Cool. If you fuck up a quick time event, then you have died and time to reload. That's the bit that I'm like, I think the best quick time I've ever encountered were in the Telltale Tales from the Borderlands, where like
Yes.
it's explicitly a comedy game. You'll get quick time events, and if you do it in time, you'll succeed. And if you fail, something really unpleasant and very funny character, and the story continues with you just having absolutely embarrassed yourself.
Oh yeah. And see, what these QuickTime events too is just like, no matter how many times I've played through this game, you get to the beginning, you make it to the freaking boulder chasing you down the hill, and you're like, all right, run, and I fucked up on square X was what I needed to press. Leon gets yeeted into a wall. I'm like, all right, I got it this time. Run, and I go slam on square and X, and it tells me L1, R1. Leon dies again, and I'm like, why did you change it? I did my homework.
It's all reflexes.
It's so brutal.
I also think I actually quite like the way it I have a soft spot for QuickTime events like integrated into a wider combat thing, like as a contextual dodge, because like it
those are fun.
Feels like it makes it feels like you're not playing a character who's like necessarily super nimble or constantly dodging about, but they sometimes get out of the way and sometimes they don't.
Yeah. It adds a little bit more dynamicness. That's not a word, but you get what I mean.
Do the quick time events in this game change depending on what difficulty you're playing on, or is it the same? Like, are they
I
faster?
think
if
I
it's
think
time?
they're random.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
The button schemes are like random between like 2 or 3 schemes, but
how much time you have to like react, or is it across the board? Because I wasn't having that much trouble with them, and I find them quite. I was playing on easy just because I wanted to get through it quite quickly.
Yeah.
Because I never finish these games, and I always feel bad, so I try to like get as much done as possible.
Yeah.
I've just kind of found them a little bit. It just kind of was a little bit distracting and kind of got in the way for me a little bit. But I don't know. Do you count like QuickTime events, like, you know, when he's outside the church and you've got like that wooden walkway that he's like walking down, and then there's these big gaps, you have to go up and press X to jump across. That doesn't count, does it?
No, I think those are just
okay.
contextual button presses. But
I found those in particular really annoyed me, because it's like, oh yeah, sick. You can't fuck it up, can you? You just go up and press X. It's like, I don't know. For some reason it really got on my nerves. It's like, just let me walk. Let me just walk across. I'm just pressing X for no reason. It's like, I don't know. I can press X without your help. Like,
so
I don't know.
I have a funny story to tell about the Krauser fight, the actual Krauser fight, because I was apparently fast enough with my knife that like whenever he would get up to me, I would slash him, I would hit him, but he would start his animation, so like the little like do the quick time event button presses would pop up for a second, and then they'd be like, ah, and he'd just go back down. And I think I did that like a good like 12 or 16 times, and just like, get good, scrub.
the knife is OP.
That was very satisfying. Greg, how do you feel about QTEs? Because I haven't
how
heard
do I
about
feel
you.
about QTEs? I mean, I hadn't gotten up to the Krauser one this time, but I did really like the ones that just pop up in the middle of a fight, like with your fighting. Like Mendez is the first one that comes to mind. In that initial church, when you suddenly get the option of like, quick dodge, and it's like, oh, he's gonna attack me, and then Leon does it. Or I really like outside of cutscenes, they were nice. Like the knights in the castle section, when you're playing as Ashley, like it's spooky. You're in a spooky castle, and there's spooky knights, and you're like, okay, some of these are gonna come to life and attack me. And then when they do, you're like, I twitch reacted. I saw that. That feels really nice. But also at the same time, I feel like an unfortunate number of deaths did come from me like slipping, being like, "Oh fuck, I forgot it." Didn't realize there was a quick time in this cutscene here.
Yeah.
Impaled again.
Impaled again.
Okay. Let's just move right along. And so, what was the scariest moment for you while playing this game? And if not the scariest, what was the most stressful? What caused you the most distress? And we're gonna start with Kai because I want to hear what you think.
Learning the controls. I think getting accustomed to that's like the most most of the things. Well, right. So like being able to walk and aim my knife at the same time was like not being able to do those two things at the same time took so much getting used to for me. And like you'd think I'd learn after like the second time or like third time. No, frequently I would go up to how close I thought I had to be to stab this guy, and then would try to walk. I'm not close enough. Try to walk forward, look up, and then he just stabs him with the pick, and it's like, it just, especially because like you can't really tell the distance. You don't know how close you are. So I think most of the time it was just me kind of like trying to go up and going, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, and then like going back, and a lot of it was just panicking because I mean I think from what people have said that might be intentional, that the controls are kind of a little bit janky to make it harder for you, but yeah, that was my worst thing, was just against regular guys. Like the first boss fight is like the El Gigante, right, the big old mutant man. Yeah. I had no trouble with that. I walked around and had the what's the submachine gun? I basically just did that, and then yeah, that's it. Just ran out and then just used the shotgun, and then that was about it. But like just regular cannon fodder was like my biggest threat because it just freaked me out because like the controls were totally just foreign to me. But I don't know, like as it went on, I got a bit better, but it was hard to unlearn everything I'd known from just all the other games I'd played in my life. But yeah, so I think that was probably it. Just like regular guys.
Now, did you save the wolf for that El Gigante fight?
Of course I did. I saved. I didn't know he would help me, but I saved him because he was hurt.
The first time I played the game, I thought I had to shoot the bear trap to set him free, and I'm like, aha, I did it. I did the thing, and he ran away, and I was like, oh, perfect. And he never came to help.
See you later.
Oh dear.
I do good. I do good. He was still alive.
Still alive, but traumatized. That's no way to live.
Oh, me.
All right. Let's. You know, Johnny, you've been second on all of these so far, so why ruin a trend?
It's hard for me to say because, like, I've been trying to think back to like when I played at age 13 or something, and then like which was the bit that got me. I have a suspicion that like the first time that like one of the heads popped and there was like a the first time that happened, I was like, oh. Also, maybe like crossing that big pond in the boat because like I know what's in there.
Yeah.
I don't want it to get me. This time round, I don't know about scariest, but the part I found the hardest was knowing that my best friend in the world, Mike in the helicopter with the machine gun, was going to die because I knew it was coming. But when he turns up and he's just reckoning, it's like, and Leon's like, let's get a beer after. I'm like, oh no. So yeah,
I think I have that
like the helicopter man,
cracking cold ones in heaven.
I think I have that like in the recording right now, but like, yeah, shout out to Mike, best character.
Shout out to Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Oh god. Bryan.
Okay, I'd say for most stressful, I agree with the parasites popping out of their head moment because it's unfair. You're like, wait, that's headshots are the way to win and save ammo. What do you mean now I have to fight a giant blade creature flailing around?
Head pop, bad man down.
Yeah, like no, that's not. No, I've put like fair. 5 hours into this game already. What do you mean you're changing it up?
Why isn't he melting?
I would. Oh man, there's a lot of very stressful moments, especially like boss fights where you're just stuck in a very small, tight room with a monster that only dies from an RPG that you did not buy properly.
So,
but I think worse than that for me was first experiencing the regenerators.
oh yes,
And in the GameCube version, you didn't have a thermal scope. So you couldn't see the parasites within them. So the first time they came around and walking into the room, I'm like, aha, shotgun, flail to the ground, die. And then it's just like flopping like a fish and just limbs start growing back. And I'm like, oh, no, I was convinced it couldn't die. I ran away from that first one. And I'm like, all right, it can't die. It's going to chase me. That's fine. And then
Put that one in with the chainsaw man.
right? You're like, no, you're not worth the pitas, my friend. And then you turn the corner and there's another one joining the party and you're like, all right, I'm just gonna take a break from this game and I'm gonna play when there's daylight out.
oh,
And they snipe, like if you shoot their legs off, they will like leap across like 30 feet to gnaw on your neck and in like hypersonic speed. It's miserable.
fun,
Fuck them.
joy. Greg, what was your other than the heads popping out? Because you described
the
this to
heads
me
popping
like
out.
as you'd played this game before, but there were still like a couple of moments that still got you.
Yeah. I did not expect. So my first time playing the Chainsaw Man was the scariest. The general scenario of Resident Evil 4 is you're in a creepy village with a creepy castle. There's a bunch of creepy guys. They're like an angry mob, and there's one of them has like a burlap sack over his head and a chainsaw. And when I was first playing in high school, I was like, oh, he's a tough guy. I'll shoot him with a shotgun, and that'll stop him. And it didn't. And he like one-shotted me. But this time around, I got to him and I was like, I'm smart enough for this. I'm just gonna run right past you. And it wasn't until later in the castle, so beyond the village, the first fight against I had to look up the name of this guy, the Garradors, the blind ones.
Oh, the Wolverine ones.
Yeah, the Wolverine ones. There's so like you show up and there's like a prison. You know it's a prison because Leon's like, this looks like a prison. And it's like, I guess they have a prison in this castle. And you walk in there and
So I believe technically it's a dungeon.
it's technically a dungeon.
Yeah.
Come on, Greg.
It's an old castle. But you show up and inside the dungeon there's like this guy and he's got like sewn up eyes. I think you can see the claws and it's clearly like you see him and it's like he's gonna jump out at me. You're gonna jump out at me. And like there's a very small room and it's like, okay, I'm gonna get locked in here and you're gonna jump out at me, but I've got to hit this lever next to you. And so like they managed to make it so he only jumps out at you at just the moment you've like just after you've expected him to. Because I remember I was like, okay, I know what's happening. Come on. And then he doesn't jump out. And I was like, oh, maybe he only jumps out when I pull the lever. Yeah, I think I remember that correctly. And then he fucking springs to life. It terrified me.
Can I change my answer? Sorry.
Sure.
The dogs after you go back to that church, I didn't see them at first and I went up and I hate like dogs, like vicious dogs in games. They're fucking awful. And so I just went up and then that was the first time I think I died in that game. I was playing on easy to be fair, but I hated it. They're just like too quick. And then do their heads go all as well?
They sure do.
I'm not sure. Yeah, that was the worst thing for me. And so I went back and bought an incendiary grenade and then used that as soon as I could from as far away as possible because I don't want to deal with that. That's not fun for me. So yeah, that's my answer. Sorry.
Fuck everything over there.
Fucking hate those dogs.
Oh god. I think for me, there were a lot of moments that once you have Ashley, where it's just like,
Ashley.
oh shit, I've got this other person that I need to care about. And there were a lot of moments where I'm just like, all right, wait here. And then like I go in, there's a couple of enemies and like, all right, this isn't so bad, and then a whole bunch come from behind and just start like steal her, and it's like, no, I thought it was safe.
She does the same help Leon scream.
Yeah.
Yep.
The exact same one.
This happened in particular in like the first bit, like getting into the castle, which is why I was very satisfied when I got to put down Salazar, the half pint, because just like all of those moaning cultists, I went out of my way to kill every single one of them, because like, shut the fuck up, shut up, enough, stop, you're done, no more. Oh. It was simultaneously very satisfying to do, and also just like, no, I hate this, no.
I think for me, when I was playing, like I would get to points where I'd be too tired to continue just because of like something that would happen to me. And the time when I stopped playing for me was when Ashley walked into 3 bear traps in a row, and I used up most of my healing items on her. It was like, actually, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. I also find it astounding that a 20-year-old woman cannot climb down a ladder without my assistance. I think that is insane to me that she needs my help to get down a ladder.
To be fair, like, she's the president's daughter, so she's probably
true.
never had to climb down a ladder herself.
That's
You know?
maybe she doesn't know what it is.
But yeah.
See, I thought that the reason why she didn't do it was she didn't want Leon looking up her skirt, which, like, fair, I guess, but also, like, eh.
Yeah, but I mean, she also does. She does climb up ladders. It's just the down that she doesn't climb.
But she always waits for you to go first.
I mean, that's a fair tactic.
Yeah.
You go first, Leon. Just check it out for me.
Yeah. I mean, like,
Horrible cop.
I don't think Leon would look. He's too much of a himbo. He's too sweet. Okay. So, I think, other than sort of like the scariest or most stressful moment, what was the moment that kind of stuck with you the most from the game? Either like narratively or in gameplay?
We can solve my notes.
And I'm going to actually break from tradition. Johnny, lead us off.
I would probably say being chased by a huge stone robot of Spanish
Salazar.
aristocrat, as I mashed buttons, and yeah, that stuck with me. I think it was one of those things where, like, I think that was very, because it's a bit more than than has happened in previous Resident Evils. Like, it's like, okay, we're in a, like, as the series goes on, the ridiculousness is slightly starting. Like, we're out of the like the world of like sci-fi horror pulp and into this is a giant stone robot chasing you. Which it was very much more the direction of like 5 as well, with like, people punching boulders and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, the boulder punching.
I really want to play 5, actually. Like, everything I've heard about 5 is
it's
like...
a treat.
Is that, like, this is not a Resident Evil game. This is just...
It's frustrating because...
oh boy!
It is the culminate. It is technically the culmination of the story of Resident Evil completely up to that point. It's the death of Albert Wesker, which is,
that's
huge.
pretty big.
But it is also like it's just a deeply uncomfortable game to play, because like it feels reductive to be like, oh, it's a really racist game. But the Resident Evil deals in is very much like a Japanese developer dealing in tropes and stereotypes.
Oh,
so like in the first few, like there's a reason that the original game is set in a place called Raccoon City, because that's what Capcom writers were like. Yeah, that's what an American city's called, Raccoon City. And then you go to like Resident Evil 4, and you've got like these sort of very stereotypical Spanish peasants.
Very typical Spanish.
The church and like and shouting about outsiders in this sort of rural Spanish village. And in Resident Evil 5, they go to Africa.
Oh no!
I heard about this.
So like, there's no real part of the game that I'm like, oh, that is clearly like the writers or the designers like being deliberately or like being like super racist. But the fact of the matter is, like most of the zombies you're shooting are African people, and there are some levels that take place in like African, in inverted commas, like rural African villages, which are depicted in, well, the ways you'd expect a developer who calls their American city Raccoon City to depict rural African villages.
Okay,
so it's a very uncomfortable game to play. At least,
Noted.
Yeah, I have always found it so.
So it's one of those cases where like ignorance does not sort of like justify.
I mean, I know that it was called out on a lot of this stuff at the time, so I'm hesitant to like be like, oh, they just didn't know any better. Whether they didn't know any better or they just didn't care, it's not really my place to say. But like, it's certainly not a. Yeah, it's an uncomfortable game to play. Like, I've streamed a lot of the Resident Evil games. Resident Evil 5 is like, I can't stream this.
Fair enough. Maybe I won't go to Resident Evil 5 then.
I mean, cool. Just look up the bullet punch clip.
I'm not policing anyone's like I've played it and like absolutely, but just be aware that that's a thing.
Right.
Noted. All right. Bryan, what was the moment that stuck with you most, either narratively or in gameplay? Like, what is, when people say Resident Evil 4, what does your brain go to first?
So the game has moments where you have a little like ounce of victory, and you're like, yes, and then if you are standing in the wrong spot, the wrong time, they will pull that rug from under you. And when this happened to me, I put down my controller and laughed because I couldn't believe what happened. And it was later in the game where you end up fighting two El Gigantes in this like lava furnace arena, and there's a ladder to some scaffolding that you can quickly like run up to, and then you lure the El Gigantes towards the middle of the arena. You go and zip line down to the other side, and you're like, haha, I got the switch. And then you just wait for one of them to go into the middle, and you drop it down a lava pit, and it dies. And you're like, perfect, one down, easy, I can take care of the other one. Well, if you stand a little too close to that lava pit after your victory lap, the one that fell into the pit pops back up and grabs you and just slams dunks you into the lava and then just perishes. And I couldn't believe what happened. I was like, what?
That happened to my first D&D character. Fun fact.
Yes. And so I'll good job. You got me. I flew too close to the lava.
Greg, what is your RE4 moment that sticks
My
with you?
RE4 moments. Whenever we talk about these moments, I always end up picking something earlier in the game. So I'm going to do that again. Just because, like, you're not alone when you're dealing with this creepy village in this creepy castle with this creepy cult. There's not just Ashley, who we've talked about that you're looking for. There's also a really cool guy named Louise Sarah. He shows up. He's competent with a gun, and he's a little mysterious, but he's really amicable. And there's a really good sequence in the first half of the game when you're still in the village where he sees you've got Ashley, the president's daughter. You get her upstairs, and he's like, "Hey, you and me, we're gonna hold this cabin against all those cultists that are showing up." And you're inside this cabin, and you're like fighting side by side with him. And at that point in time, I had just gotten Ashley, and I had forgotten whether or not he could be hurt or whatever. So there was a point in time where I got like really worried because there was a lot of ruckus happening to my left shoulder where you cannot see from Leon. So I was like, what's going on? I swung my gun over, and Louise is getting grabbed by a zombie, and I was like, I'll help you, man. And then he does the Leon like kick animation, and I was like, I had a genuine moment where I was like, oh, Louise, you're so competent. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, and like we stood back to back, and I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I love you, man.
Dudes rock.
Fuck yeah.
Dudes rock, yes.
Just a couple of guys being dudes.
We should have a new
What's going
segment on the
there?
show where we vote for the sexiest character, because it's Louise by a mile.
It is Louise.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Wait,
I
what
mean,
do you
to
mean
be
it's
fair-
not Sadler? What?
Yeah, like there's not a vast it's not a vast array of choice.
Yeah, true.
No.
True. LG Gans, I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, I suppose there's Ada as well, but you know, it's a...
Ah, yes, the Gaslight Gatekeep girl boss. She's earned that title.
Yep.
Blueprint.
Christ. Guy, do you have a moment?
Do I?
Do you?
You know, I think it's very boring. But I think just the delivery of the merchant when you don't have enough cash, and he tells you very rudely, "Not enough cash," and that's my favorite delivery.
Can we
Like,
talk about the merchant? Can you tell us about the merchant?
Let's talk about the merchant.
Is a horrible pervert that just pops out of nowhere at your worst moments, where he kind of like, you know, you just like, you've nearly, I don't know what happens to you, I can't remember what happened to you just before he first shows up. I think you nearly got like your head caved in by a big guy.
No,
and then
it's
you got
just after you've escaped.
Yeah,
the
you
guy,
just got
like,
infected.
you and Louise are like tied up, and you're having some banter, and then the guy accidentally frees you with the giant axe.
That's it.
Uh,
Yeah. And then you sort of escape, and Louise goes and does his thing, and then he sort of pokes his head through the window. It's like, you just had one of the worst moments of your life. Want to engage in some trade? And then throughout the game, which I love how Leon not once fucking questions why this guy just appears out of nowhere. It's like, I'm in these deep caves and it was a secret entrance. Oh, you've set up your fucking sconces like with the blue flame to fucking trade with me. Like, I think he's one of my favorite characters in this game, because it's like, who the fuck are you? What are you? Where are you spending this money?
Every line of his dialogue has been burned into my brain for like 20 years. Just like,
I'll buy that for a high price.
Gosh.
Yo.
every time you go to the shop, it's like, what are you buying?
The merchant
pink shit,
is
honestly.
wild, because I know 3 things about this merchant. 1, impeccable fashion. Impeccable. Love it. 2, he's infected with the parasite, because like
Yes, that's what I was going to talk about. I
he's
didn't
got the
realize
eyes.
that till I was looking it up on like the wiki. I was like, it's obvious from his appearance that he's a Gonado, and I was like, no,
so like
no, not
the
my
moment-
friends.
the moment that like got like that I figured it out was like there were a couple of moments later on where it's just like, oh yeah, the you can tell the like one of the notes says like you can tell the parasites because like eyes glow under the at night, like they don't like come out like during the day. That's why you didn't see them at the beginning of the game. And there's I think it's like towards the end of the castle, like right before Ashley gets kidnapped by bugs. And just like he's sitting out there and his eyes are just like glowing bright red, and it's like, you're friendly. You're like,
I kind of preferred him when he was just a weirdo. Like him having a place there, it's like it's very noble if he's like some sort of defector. But I did prefer when I thought he was just a random pervert, as Kai said.
Yeah.
well, like
And technically, I think there are. I don't know whether it's like within the world, but there are more than one of him, because you can. I believe you can kill any individual vendor, but
I never tried.
If you kill one of them, the others, like the other locations, they're still there.
Yeah.
So
It's kind of a nice joy situation.
If you're on like the hardest difficulty, if you kill him once, I think he's dead forever. But
Really? I
like,
didn't know that.
yeah, I read when I was on the wiki and I learned like, oh, he's a Ganado. It was like on professional difficulty, if you kill him, he's gone for good. But on anything else, like, yeah, he'll be back, or another one will be there.
Just googling Resident Evil 4 merchant what? Question mark.
I need to know.
Inquiring minds need to know. But just like he's friendly and retained enough of his faculties. There's another note like later on where Sadler's like, yeah, the parasite like reflects the will or the mental ability of the hosts, and then like, which is why like I've got to make sure that I'm not betrayed again. And like, I thought at first he was talking about Luis, but I think he might have been talking about the merchant, because like, again, he's just fine. Like, he's just like, whatever. Yeah,
Did other Resident
please
Evil games
give me all of
have
your precious
merchants?
gems.
Is this the first game to have a merchant? Because I know 8 does with the big guy, but
I
right, that's
think
enough of
it's
that.
the first game to have like an in-game merchant. Like I think,
Right.
I think some of the older ones have like Resident Evil 3 had like a mercenaries mode, and like I think previous games had like unlockable stuff. Like
yeah.
if you beat certain mini games, or if you like did certain like, because you're expected to play them loads of times and like try to get a high score in terms of your quickness, or how little you died or how little you saved. And there are certain like ranks or this sort of thing that will unlock items. But I think it is the first one that had like just straight up like,
Yeah.
in this game there is a person that you talk to and they will sell you a bigger gun.
A lot of good things on sale,
That he
stranger.
did.
Oh yes. Oh, I forgot to mention like my moment, because I have the Resident Evil one where just like, yeah, you guys just did a legitimately good job with this, and then like this one was for me. The Resident Evil one was like right at the beginning of the game where just like you don't know what's going on, and then you get just swarmed by the entire village, and like I didn't know how to react. I'd been in the game for like maybe like not even 5 minutes, like backed up into a corner and just like, well, I guess this is it. Game over at the beginning. And then the church bell rings and they all leave, and that gave me some genuine dread. The other moment was fighting Salazar, and I had saved the RPG from earlier in the castle, and it's like, oh, I'm going to use it on this stupid boy's face. This is going directly into his face. And then I did. That boss fight took exactly 30 seconds, because it's just like, here's the cutscene, oh, big Resident Evil eyeball, like classic Legend of Zelda, you shoot that, and like, hey, look, the weak point. This is going to be very satisfying. And it was.
Like, I love the starting village fight. Like, it is like amazing. Though I like, there's a part of me that I almost wish like it had been quite as good, because the number of games, both Resident Evil and like other games, that have tried to recapture that magic with
God,
like
yeah.
interminable, like hold off impossible waves of enemies until some arbitrary point. Like the number of games that have done that since, I'm like, oh. And none of them have worked like this original one. And so like there's a part of me that's like, I wish it had been a bit worse, and so people weren't constantly trying to copy it.
Yeah. I think the only one that comes close is Crisis Core, where it's just like, you know you get overwhelmed. This is where you die. You know it for a fact. And
Halo Reach as well. The end of Halo Reach does, which is gets me every single time, even though I know it's coming, and it makes me cry every single time. Because
I think those work though, because they're serving a different purpose, and like they're serving their own purpose. Where it's like the first big village blowout is to be like, hey, listen, you're just some guy, and you're gonna have to be on guard.
Constantly.
It's to put the fear of God into you. And when other games are like, we're gonna try to put the fear of God into you, but then the rest of the game doesn't follow up, I think that's what you're complaining about, or not complaining about. I think that's what you're pointing out, Johnny.
Yeah,
right?
it's because like in Resident Evil 4, it is saying, hey, you know how in every other game in Resident Evil and pretty much just in the world, there are 20 enemies here. When you kill these 20 enemies, it's finished. You've cleared the area, and it's been like, no, the rules. What you think the rules are for this sort of game, they're not. We can throw infinite men and chainsaws at you, and then stop for some reason. And that is really effective and really unsettling, but it's also a trick that's hard to pull again, because once you're like, oh, games don't have to work like they used to, it doesn't carry the same weight.
Yeah. So do you think that moment was part of the reason why it works was that it was sort of like built on the back of Resident Evil 1 through 3, and
I think there's a lot in Resident Evil 4 that like is powerful in its like at its time, in its context. Like I think there's a reason that it like rippled out through the space in games like it did, and like I think it's one of those things where you go back to it and it's still a fun game, it's still a good game, there's still moments that hit, but it is such an of its time game in a lot of ways that like you're never gonna recapture that feeling.
Well said. All right. I think we've gone through all of the questions that I have prepared. So, well, let's just wind down and take some audience questions, because we've got a little bit of time. All right. So, we've got, I'm going to say about like 20 minutes, just take audience questions, and then thank you all for coming. This has been absolutely, really, really fun.
Can I, while we're waiting for questions, get people's opinion on, like, because we're going to, I presume, doing more older games in the future. What is there like a balance to achieve when kind of being, what's the word, like critical of things that maybe it's just because it's an older game? Because I had some complaints about certain sound elements in this game, but I don't know whether that's just because it's an older game, different engines. Should I go, oh, I really didn't like this because I thought it didn't make sense or it didn't sound very good? Or do you know what I mean? Like, I have trouble trying to kind of differentiate between old and then also they just didn't think about it and it wasn't very good even at the time. Like, is there a way for me to do that, or should I just kind of assume it's old?
Being of its time or something being old doesn't invalidate your own reaction to it. Like, if you didn't like, if you didn't like a sound, if you thought like, oh, this sounds like garbage, then you're absolutely, then like say, I found it really hard to play because this sounded like garbage, and like, I think others, like someone else is absolutely within their rights to be like, but when I first heard it, we're like a choir of angels. And like, I think it's like, I think as with anything old, like having the context of coming to it for the first time significantly after it, it's a different context, but it's no less like, you don't need to try and put yourself in the space of like pretending that, pretending that the context hasn't changed. What were the sound? I'm curious now.
It was two examples for me. Was when you're fighting El Gigante, his footsteps had this really weird chorus effect, like this kind of doubling thing going on almost, and it really, really like, it was really jarring to me for some reason. I don't know why it had that. I don't know whether, because you can do chorus to stuff for certain things to kind of make it seem like it's bigger if you can't pitch it down any further. So I was wondering if that might have been the reason they did it. And then also, when it's raining and you go into the church and then you only hear the thunder but not the sounds of rain on the roof, that was also really brought me out of it, because it was like, you would still be able to hear the rain on the roof. And the fact that the thunder is exactly the same inside as outside, kind of just, it's like they took the session file for the rain and just took out the rain and left the thunder in and didn't do any fucking EQ on the rest of it. And it just kind of was like, maybe because they only had a certain amount of like file size and this kind of thing, but it felt like just muffle the sounds of the rain and it would completely immerse you. I mean, you know, I feel like the sounds of rain muffled on a roof of a building you're in is this kind of atmosphere that is so iconic that I mean, you know, it's obviously a legendary game. I don't want to criticize it too much.
No, this is a super valid criticism, actually.
Yeah.
Like,
That's my thing. Was like, you could have done more, but maybe
they had EQ back then.
It did exist, yes, but I don't know. Yeah,
I feel like that's less of like, you know, you come into the game later thing, and more the like just being a massive audio nerd.
That might be a main thing. Yeah, you got me better actually.
Yeah,
No,
that's
it's like no.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I didn't like when I was 13. You're right. When I was 13, playing it first time in context, I didn't notice the EQ on the thunder in the church. But I also didn't notice it playing it this time.
Yes, maybe it's a me problem.
Jonny Sims stuffing Kai into a locker for being a nerd.
I mean, I
You've
can't
seen it here
believe
first,
it.
folks.
This is the end of my career. Oh god.
I mean, that's exactly the sort of complaint you want from someone who does a lot of audio, being like, "Oh, the audio on this isn't very good." It's like, yeah.
yeah, it's. I guess it shows sort of, you know, when you're a professional, you're going to notice the things that are out of place.
Yeah.
But it also sort of highlights when it comes to Foley and all of that sort of thing. Every piece of that has to be placed there deliberately, which makes it all the more fascinating when there are those sort of moments where, like, you don't think about the fact that you're hearing this, but its absence would be weird.
Yeah. That's I think that's the kind of approach I take to a lot of my sound design, is like, people aren't going to know it's there, but if it wasn't, or even it will be some slightly kind of subconscious psychological thing that it's there, you go, oh, you've put loads of bass on this for no reason. Like, you know, I don't know. That's the kind of approach I take to most of it.
Yeah, people
but
generally
sometimes
don't know why something sounds off, but they often will like sense that it sounds off. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, from my point of view, like my similar criticism is, as someone who spends a lot of my time spin kicking people infected with controlling parasites, like their heads just don't explode like that. Like
Yeah.
You know, oh, I'd love for their heads just to crumple, but no.
It's massive
wish more
liberties
bodies-
taken by Capcom.
Yeah, I wish more bodies dissolved into
Come
paste
on,
into
Capcom.
the ground, but you know, we've got to deal with it. And
I did
Jesus.
run into something else that reminded me of the age of this game, where I was playing on the PS4 version, where they must have remastered all the models and stuff to look really nice and shiny, but that's like mostly all they had to do because so many of the cutscenes were in engine. But in where most recent part I got to before I stopped, chapter 4.1, there's a part in the clock tower where you can activate the clock tower, and because the clock tower is in like a separate little instantiated cell or whatever, then the inside of it is different than the outside, but they still need to show the outside changing once you've like pulled the switch. I guess they snuck a little pre-rendered cutscene in there, because here on the PS4 version, suddenly it cuts to outside the clock tower and it's like fuzzy as shit, because I assume it's like pre-rendered from the GameCube, and it's just like 5 seconds, but I was suddenly like, oh wow, this is what it looks like. I didn't remember.
360p.
I'm sorry, like,
I didn't remember that's what it looked
being,
like.
whenever a pre-rendered cutscene would cut in and be like, oh, the graphics on this cutscene, they're amazing.
Nostalgia. This reminds me of playing Soul Reaver. That's a game that, like, I wish it held up better, but also, like, if you go back to playing it, hope you like pushing block puzzles.
The funniest thing about trying to play Soul Reaver for me, I watched my dad play Soul Reaver a bit on his PlayStation. And I tried going back to it, and there's like really dark parts, like physically dark, light-wise. And I tried to bring a torch into it, and the light of the torch crackled against like the textures of these walls that were like literally just painted black. They were just colored black to try to like make it look like it was dark. So it's not like my torch wasn't doing anything. I was just illuminating the dark mesh. Very interesting. Oh, Tony's go.
Oh, I actually have it's not a question from the chat. It's actually just a kind of interesting comment. We were talking about the infrared scope. I've learned from the chat that it was in the GameCube version, but
Oh, really?
yeah. So it's definitely safe to mention. Hold on, let me see it. The IR scope is in the GameCube version. You have to shut the freezer down in the facility, which you don't have to do, but you can get it there, according to Brendan. in chat. So I wanted to comment on that because that seems
That's how I had to do it.
See, yeah, that's how I remember doing it when I was playing it again on the PlayStation 2. But when I played it on the GameCube, I unless I skipped over it out, I thought I did the
don't
freezer.
remember, to be honest. I know, like, I remember that I had it, like, I had it in the GameCube version, because otherwise you couldn't shoot the wobbly things
Right.
properly. But I don't remember when or where I got it, to be honest.
Can we just take a moment and talk about the regenerators and how they're goddamn terrifying?
Oh, they're lovely.
And then they're like, "Hey, do we want to make it more terrifying? Let's just have one with a bunch of spikes."
Yeah.
And just extendo out.
Like, I think they might be the only enemy in the game where just like you can tell they're there before even seeing them because you can hear their little like wheezing like breath.
Yeah.
Like, unlike sort of like with other zones or little, I guess, zones, there's where it's just sort of like they let it be sort of like totally still until like bam, it's game time. With them, it's just like, oh, you know, they're here.
To be fair, like Resident Evil has like quite a good history of like giving you certain audio cues as soon as you go in a place. You're like, oh dear.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there are some games like you'll go in an area and you'll just hear like or something like that, and you're like, oh no, there's
Something's in
fuckers
here.
on the ceiling, or like all sorts of weird, horrible nonsense. Also, I think they took in Code Veronica X, one of the like iconic enemies of that game is called a Bandersnatch, and it's like this weird kind of blobby creature that has one really long arm that sort of just extends out towards you and like grabs you by the face. And I think Capcom definitely took the right lesson. That's like, oh, you know what's unsettling? Stretching, weird, like kind of gooey wobbly things. And it's like, yeah, congratulations, Capcom, you took that idea and made it much scarier. Thank you.
Oh yes,
I do love all the variety of enemies in RE4.
We do have a question in the chat from our very own Tony, and it's mostly aimed at Johnny. But what do you like about Resident Evil over something, say, like Silent Hill?
I mean, I really like Silent Hill. Like, I think Resident Evil for me, like it came to me at a very formative age, and there's so much of it. Like, there's a decent amount of Silent Hill, but there's so much Resident Evil. Some might say too much. I think most sensible people would say too much, and it's all so ridiculous. It's just, I don't know. It is daft in ways that I really enjoy, and like by this point, the elements of it have taken on almost like a soap opera quality. You know, there's like one of the spin-off ones, the Resident Evil Revelations. Resident Evil Revelations 2 is Claire Redfield from Resident Evil 2. And Barry Burton, one of the side characters from Resident Evil 1's daughter, Moira, being kidnapped on a secret island, which is being run by Wesker's secret sister. And it is...
Holy
like,
shit.
it's just so much, like... There's so much, like, intro. There's like, yeah, if you're playing Resident Evil Revelations 2, you probably... like know enough about the series that we could just make some really deep cuts, and it's not good. Like, and I'm like, yes, I don't feel good about the fact that I'm the target audience for that, but
so do you think Resident Evil is sort of you enjoy Resident Evil sort of like because it is a less cerebral horror than maybe Silent Hill?
Yeah, like, I mean, I'll be honest, like, Resident Evil's relationship with horror as a genre is
pretty loose.
It's pretty loose. Like, they will generally get less and less horror until they reach a certain point and then reboot it and like do something new. So like the original Resident Evil, then Resident Evil 4, then Resident Evil 7 are all like the start of kind of new eras
Yeah.
in Resident Evil, each of which kind of like resets the dial back to horror. Whereas, like, you know, your first era Resident Evil ends up going in sort of like ends up in very like big conspiracy corporation sort of stuff. Then like your second era from Resident Evil 4 goes into this weird geopolitical, like they do a lot with like drug lords and like false flag attacks from different bioterror monitoring organizations and or like Eastern European countries which are using bioweapons for all sorts of things, and it's ridiculous. It's like Metal Gear, like it's the level of like geopolitical understanding of like the Metal Gear Solid franchise, but instead of Metal Gears, it is just like weird, horrible monstrosities with eyeballs on them. And then the third one, which is like the Resident Evil 7 and 8, which is like, what if we just made it just about one dude and he was getting scared a lot by like, you know, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre / like, you know, Dracula and all your Hammer horror goodies in Resident Evil 8.
Right on. All right. And another viewer question. I think this is probably going to be our last one because we are approaching the point of no return. How do we all feel about Resident Evil, the film franchise?
Ooh.
I've not seen it.
I
I'm
think
sorry.
they're fun if you go into them very lighthearted and not connected to. Obviously, they go off their own route from the game series, but they get a little over the top. But I think it's a fun watch nonetheless. At least whatever. I think I've watched the first 5. I don't know how many there are
now. The last
now.
one is weird. The last one like tries to. So the Resident Evil film franchise is fascinating. So like, first one actually a pretty good movie.
Mm-hmm.
Second one not a good movie, a lot of fun though. Third one bad. Fourth one weird high point, not good, but like actually kind of fun. Fifth and sixth just not good. But what's fascinating is they are all directed by the same guy. They're all Paul.
Oh yeah.
They
They're
all star his wife, Mila Jovovich, as his super powerful OC, who is like just the most important person in the Resident Evil universe, and like not in any of the games, but like characters ostensibly from the games constantly are meeting Alice Mila Jovovich's character and being like, wow, you're pretty cool. Also, interestingly, they just end the world after the second one, and all the last 4 take place in a post-apocalyptic Resident Evil world. But it's fascinating because every one of them ends on. It does the thing film franchises often do like this, where every movie ends on like a cliffhanger that implies where it's going next, and every movie after it quickly like just ignores it and goes in a completely new direction, which is like makes a lot of sense for those movies where like, you know, different director, different crew is taking the helm each time, but it's the same guy. It's like it's every movie he ends implying one thing, and then the next movie they like deal with it in like 2 minutes, and then they're doing something else. You know, like the fourth one ends with like, oh, okay, so we're on a like we're on a container ship with like a few thousand of the last survivors of the world we've and we're being attacked by the remnants of the Umbrella organization. And you're like, oh, okay, cool, I see where this is going. So the fifth movie, there's a very brief scene of this, and then Alice wakes up in what is later revealed to be an Antarctic facility that is not in any way connected with any of that stuff.
cool.
Getting
So-
bored and deciding I want to do a new thing now.
Yeah, no, it's all that. Also, like they bring Leon in the fifth movie, and he's not well done.
Aw.
If
Our
you
boy.
want to just feel a little bit sad, look up Resident Evil movies Leon. And it's very much the Leon you get in the fifth movie in a not super profitable franchise. Also, the director really likes putting Mia Jovovich naked in a tank.
It's happened multiple times.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool.
You know what? It's whatever. It's their deal. Their marriage.
Yeah, guys.
Right?
We have to see it if we watch the
She,
film.
she clearly consented, so
Oh yeah.
I've only seen the first Resident Evil movie. But Johnny, with you talking about seeing Leon in the movies, there's the one sequence that like sticks in my head from that first one that does feel like a thing that could happen in Resident Evil 4, except for the end bit. It's like that laser grid
It
sequence.
happened.
I was just about
It
to say
did
that's the only
happen.
thing I've seen from those films.
Yeah,
is a
it's
laser
insane. People should see it. There's like a military guy, because it's Resident Evil, so like, but it's Resident Evil before it becomes all about Alice, the superpowered OC. So there's like a military guy that you could imagine as being Leon-esque, and he goes into this corridor where this like AI, don't question it, there's an AI, she's bad. She's got like a laser grid defense system, and he's doing this crazy like acrobatic thing. Like I can just see the quick time events popping up as this guy's like dodging the lasers, and it's like it's so strenuous, and you think he's got it, and then she just decides to stop playing fair, which is like fair. You're in her laser grid box, and she just cuts this guy apart with this like absolute like flawless netting of lasers, and he's just like turned into cubes.
If he just would have stood like 5 feet back.
Yeah, I think they do also do like. There's a weird thing where like some of the stuff from the first Resident Evil movie is like kind of taken into later games. Like there is, I believe, a sequence in Resident Evil 6, if I'm remembering correctly, where you do need to do quick time events to dodge lasers in a corridor.
Good, because that was awesome.
They saw the movie and were like, yeah, let's do that.
Sick as fuck.
And they use the Red Queen from the first movie as like the framing device for Resident Evil: The Umbrella Chronicles, which is the rail shooter version of Resident Evils 0, 1, and 3, which doesn't really work. It doesn't actually make any sense, and it's not compelling. But they do bring it in.
all right. I think I'm gonna wrap this up. All right. Bryan, where can we find you? Other than the little tag underneath your name.
I've done a little Google, and it is actually in this.
Yeah, it's in 4.
It's in 4. It is in 4. I wasn't.
Just
It was very fun.
Yeah, just play a little farther and you'll get there. It's fun. It's a treat. Where can you find me? Yeah, you can find me at I don't really have much social media besides Instagram, so bam, it's Bryan. I am the dungeon master, or as
Dungeon
some
Daddy,
people call me, dungeon daddy of the Dungeons and Dragons campaign I run for East Coast Adventures. So that is my handle.
All right, Johnny, I'm going to save you for last because I think you have the most clout here. Greg, where can we find you?
Yeah, on Ghosts on a Train, actual play where we play Ghost Lines. Sky's on it too. That's great.
That's true.
FN's other FN stuff. I give my voice to. Midsummer's Quarantine. I'm one of the ensemble super suits. It's great. Find me on Twitter at Candlestick, but that's at the end.
Yeah. Kai, where can we find you?
I do a mythic sci-fi audio drama called Chain of Being that is I'm working on the finale of right now, so there's never a better time to catch up and get in on that sweet end tears. And I also do noise music on Bandcamp under the name Dinas, where I do all sorts of things, but mainly no input mixing, which if you want to know what that is, you have to go listen to my noise music. Get him.
And Johnny, where can we find you?
You can find my podcast, Magnus Archives, on the Rusty Quill Network. It came to an end with season 5 started last year, but you can also find. You can find my voice all over the place. I do a lot of voice acting, including for Faustian Network on Super Suits, where I do play the narrator. And you can find some of my game design work that I do with my partner Sasha under at MacGuffin and Company, which is MacGuffinandCompany.com.
All right, and all of these will be
also
in the
buy
show
my
notes.
book. It's called 13 Stories.
Buy the book.
Storeys. I need to remember to plug my book.
Gotta plug the book.
13 stories. What's it? Quick. Is there time for like a quick synopsis? Because I'm curious.
It's
Give us a
a
quick plug.
haunted house tower block in London.
Hell yes.
Sick.
Essentially.
Perfect.
It's 13 stories tall, but also there are 13 stories that are happening within. It's pretty clever. Pretty clever.
There we go. Perfect. This is
It does sound
best
delightful.
episode to chill it on. I'm Guy. You can find me at Ghost Train or Ghost_Train, and Ghosts on a Train. Other episodes of Disc Space, and I don't know, maybe on Twitter starting soon. Who knows? Who cares? This has been Disc Space. We've been the Disc Space Cadets, and we are signing off. Take care, y'all.
Ta-da.
Thank you for playing.
Bye.
And